and the First Peoples Radio presents Amplifying Voices, a project which aims to preserve, promote, and revitalize Indigenous languages and cultures. Martha Peet was born in an igloo in Taluyak, where only 4 other families lived. She's a freelance interpreter, translator, and author of the Inuktitut pocketbook. For Martha Peet, her language is incredibly important to her, and she shares how she was able to keep Inuktitut alive in her life.
To me, my language is what makes me strong, my Inuktitut language. And I use it whenever I can. And that gives me strength. That gives me happiness. And it is so important to me knowing and being fluent in my Inuktitut language, both in writing and in syllabics. Although over the years, the syllabics was taught to the Inuit by the missionaries. So that's where we got a writing system. When I started school when I was 10 years old, and I didn't know a word of English, not even one word. So I started going to school when a day school was built in my home community. There was one teacher, one classroom, known as the day school. Prior to that, in my community, there were missionaries. And these missionaries have been in they have been in Eastern Arctic, where they learned Inuktitut. And they helped the Inuit translate the Bible into Inuktitut in syllabics. So they knew both these missionaries, whether they came from France or England. They knew the syllabics writing system. And when they're in the communities, they learn how to speak the Inuktitut language. So when I was about 6, missionary and his wife decided to have a school at the minister's manse. And this is where him and his wife taught us children how to write syllabics. So I learned how to write in syllabics through the missionaries. And I have never forgotten that. For a bit there, when I was lost in my life, in the late 60s, living in Vancouver, knowing my language, knowing the writing system, it became secondary. I never knew it, but I learned in some years later, it's what's taught to me by my parents that gives me strength and know what I want in life, knowing what I want to do. Thinking that in my language, that's when I realized my mom and dad, my grandparents had given me so many tools to survive and be happy by being yourself. That is so important. And although when I went home finally, back to my home community in Taluyak, that when I tried to speak in Inuktitut to my sisters, my brother, or anybody, I couldn't speak Inuktitut. That was in the early 70s. But when I was living down south, I took it for granted that, oh yeah, I know Inuktitut, I know the writing system, but I didn't. I had forgotten it. And I was extremely embarrassed when I couldn't communicate in Inuktitut to my own sisters, my brother, and friends, elders. My siblings laughed at me, and I did feel embarrassed, but they didn't do it in a way to embarrass me. But that taught me something. From that time on, I made a vow to never, ever forget my Inuktitut, no matter where I lived. So when I moved to Winnipeg, I started doing a little bit of translation work that kept my Inuktitut up, and I was able to do my translations in Inuktitut. Sometimes I don't know in English language what that word means, especially in scientific terms, because at the time I was in school, science was not that strong. So I researched them, and sometimes I came up with the name with a word that best describes that English word, which might be a scientific word, or I study in a sentence. If I don't understand it, I study it. How can I best write this in Inuktitut so a unilingual Inuktitut speaking person will understand what this writer is saying? So I took that very seriously. I do not do translations anymore because of other commitments. However, there are so many people living here in Winnipeg, so many Inuit who are now living in Winnipeg, and I get a chance to talk to them many times. And there is Manitoba Inuit Association. 8% of them know Inuktitut. 98% of them are Inuit, familiar with Inuit culture. And that's just across the street from where I work, where only the Inuktitut is not spoken. But whenever I want to talk in Inuktitut or converse in Inuktitut, I just go across the street to Manitoba Inuit Center and talk away in Inuktitut. That's how important Inuktitut is to me. And I am very glad to say so many more Inuit are happy to be speaking in Inuktitut when they see me as an elder. It gives them pleasure to talk in Inuktitut. So Inuktitut to me is my number one priority, my Inuktitut language, my culture, where I came from. Remembering where you come from is most important. And sometimes this might create racism, but for me, I know what's important for me. I know what is important to me and my heart. So that does not bother me if they don't like it. That I don't want to use it this way, but that is their problem, not mine. I know what I want. I know where I'm going. Huliluptaok Inuktitut Okamanarama Tamani Kabluna Nuna Ni Nunagiramani Iliha Katarama Kullernik Ikichi Lunga Peet Hapquat Inuit Ikayoktingi Inuit Manitoba Inuit Association Miktairaudo Tamani Manitoba mi inungnig ikayoktirun. Ikayuin na mata inungnig tamani nunagiraptin relaktaptini. Ikayuin na mata ukawhirniglonig nakiniglonig anoraniglonig. Kuyagirakko tahapkuat hangidutaka matatap kuningan. Hangit kadaw na kapta kubiagilugo humingaarutigiraqqun humingaartunga uvanga inuurunga inuktitut qaurimalugit ilitquhitkan qaurimalugin tahapkuan hangiirutiginiartatkan tahapkuat maligumaraqqut hangiirutiginiartaqqun atorlugin hiuliluptauq igluphi'ni qaurimanahiwaqattarluhi inuktitut uqamaluhi hangiirutigiaptigu tahapkuat hangiirutigingisaqqut kiinauren hangiirutikkut tahapkuat ilitquhikkun tahapkuat uvapti'nun inu'luta iliartaurut nunait ahi'nit uvapti'nut iliartitaurut yuungitsun atoqumaguptigu naammaktun atoqumagaptigu tahapkuat pitsaurutin uvapti'nun ikayortun atorlugin kianing inuutsiarnaartugun puiguqtailigiarluhi inuuruhi inummariuruhi taapkuat hivulivinitkun inuktitut oqama'lutiki hianing inu'mata tahapkuat uvapti'nun iliartaurut nunaqartuvini ti'nik tamaunga nunapti'nungauhimalunut taapkuat iliarta ihangiirutigingisaqqun hangiirrutigiraqqut munaqhiiuyungnarupta taaktiuyungnarupta ilihaiuyungnarupta uvapti'ning kiinauraliorluta hangiirrutigirapti'nik tahapkuat iliarluta tahapkuat naammaktoq kihianik puiguqtaililutin tahapkuningan angunahiuaqutinning angunahiualeraangaffi inuktitun uqamaqattarluhi iqalukhiuruffi angayoqqaanguruhi inuktitun uqamaluhi qablunaangu tuungitsoq hagvirnia vi'matahamna uqauheqqut hagvirpalliaroq atqunangit pallaaqapta hivulliurutigileraptigu amihunut tahapkuat qablunaatut uqauhiin taamna hangiirutigihimaraqqun taipkuat atqunaqattartun ilihaiurun inuin ilihairin naglinnartun atqunarlutikki hianing uvapti'ning tamaungartitsimata inuuhiriungnartapti'ning tahamna inuuhiqqut a'lanngorpallia'mat hiullilu hila a'lanngorpalliaroq tahapkuat nunakkut a'lanngorpalliarun ilihariarrima'lutik qablunaatut iliarlutik ilitami'nik tahapkuat qanoq tukiqartut tukiliutsiaqatta'mata tahapkuat miksaanut qablunaatoqtun atorlugin kihianik puiguqtaililutin tahamnalikiaq inuktitut ihumagiupku talpa ilitara qanorli uvamnut aktorniarpa ili'ning tahapkuat hivullet uqauheqqut inuktuuman inuktitut ihumaqattarupta uqamaqattarupta qaurimatsiarniartaqqun ilitquhiringitat kullu hullilu tatpa ilitquhimmarikkun atqunarutigiravini angayoqqaapta ittupta ningiupta tahapkuan amaupta atqunarutigiravini puigorniangi naptigu inuurugun hiumalli qablunaatut kihiana qaurimaluta qanorli hanginiarpita hangirrutigiraqqut tahapkuat ilitquheqqun inuktitut ilitquhikkun hangirrutigiraqqut tehapkuan. Koyella umarunga tehapkuan. Ukaw hirakat ublumi. Tuniraw gamalo. Ukamayong naksunga. Tap kuningan.
Amplifying Voices was developed in collaboration with over 60 Indigenous language keepers, experts, broadcasters, and academics, and is guided by an Indigenous advisory group comprising broadcasters, language experts, elders, and authors. The project is produced by Multicultural and the First Peoples Radio, and funded through the Radio Fund of Canada.